Hello everyone, welcome to ITS 208 and CSC 209. This is Graphics and Visual Computing. Today we're going to have another pre-recorded class. This is in continuation to our discussion about graphics designing, and particularly we'll be talking about Adobe Photoshop. Please be sure to watch the entire video, listen, and understand the lessons attentively. Right after this class, there will be learning assessment and assignment that will be posted. So my name is Julius Rubico, your instructor. Without any further ado, let's get started. If you have any questions or clarifications regarding today's lesson, please go ahead and share it with the class. You can comment your question down to our Facebook group post, or you can send in your question to our Facebook chat group. Okay, previously we've talked about Adobe Photoshop. Particularly, we learned about layers. And today we'll be learning about the adjustment layers. So first of all, what are adjustment layers for Adobe Photoshop? The adjustment layers in Photoshop are a group of a very useful non-destructive image editing tool that add color and tonal adjustments to your images without permanently changing its pixels. So, with the adjustment layer, you can edit and discard your adjustments or restore your original image at a time. This will make your workflow in Photoshop more flexible and efficient, and is an absolute must now, right? So the adjustment layer is one of the most important one of the most important techniques that you have to learn when learning Adobe Photoshop. This is very useful when it comes to doing some compositions or just about any graphic design. So adjustment layer is like, for example, if you wanted to increase or perhaps modify the contrast, the brightness, the color, the exposure of your image, using adjustment layers will be perhaps the best tool or the best technique in doing so. Okay, so when we say here, editing tool that add color and tonal adjustment to your image without permanently changing its pixels, what does it mean is that when we're using Adobe or when we're using adjustment layers in our design, basically we are trying to add the adjustments, just about any adjustments to our photos without really changing the pixels or anything, without really altering the picture itself. This is very important when, for example, if ganatang i-edit ang photo, we want to modify the photo and we decided nga dili kita ganahan sa pag-modify nato, then it would be easier for us to just change it again or perhaps undo it. It's because we didn't really change anything to the photo itself. Muraratag ni gama ara og layer, separate layer that contains all the changes, let's say brightness and so on, and then we are just going to apply to the photo that we want. So for example, so adjustment layers are just like any other layer. Okay, we already learned about layers previously. So basically, think about just adjustment layers are just about any layers, and then we are just setting, for example, color adjustments, brightness or contrast, exposures, and any other adjustments, and then we are going to apply it to the photo itself. Okay, and then if you decided nga uy dili angay wala angay and or ganahan ba kang usbo nimo ang imong gi-add nga brightness or any other adjustments, you can just remove it or change it back to the way before. Okay, so again, just to clarify, adjustment layers does not really change anything on the image. Muraratag ni gama rata og layer that contains the brightness, the contrast, the color adjustments that we want, and then ato ra siyang ibutang atong image sa atong layer sa atong image, just like this, just like what we did, and then everything under those adjustment layer will be affected. Again, to clarify, so for example, we are trying to adjust the contrast, we are trying to adjust the exposure. We are just going to put it in this layer, and then we will put the layer on top of this image, and everything, all the effects will be applied to the image itself. Okay, we'll learn more about it, but for the meantime, let's talk about what are the different adjustment layers. What are the things that we can change, or what are the things that we can adjust to our image to make it look better? Okay, So this is how we get to the adjustment layer. So first and foremost, it will be located at our layer palette at the bottom right corner, or on the right part of our Adobe Photoshop workspace. So to access the adjustment layer, we can just click this icon below the layers palette, or we can go to the windows and then adjustment layers. We'll talk more about it, but for the shortcut, you will find it right away below the layer cunning icon. When you click this, you will find these options. The these are the adjustments, the layer adjustments that we can apply to our images. And then depending on the adjustment layer that we will select, the property panel will allow us to modify the adjustment layer. All right. Anyway, we'll learn more about it in just a moment. But for the meantime, let's talk about all of these. Kani sila tanan. We'll talk more about these and let's see how it works with Adobe Photoshop. First, before anything else, let me first open up Adobe Photoshop real quick. Okay, let's try to open up a photograph. And then we will use this photograph as we go along. Okay, so we have here an example photograph, and we will try to make use of this photograph as I'll try to explain each of the adjustment layers. All right, so basically this is a raw photo that I took in front of in our front yard. This is supposedly again a raw photo of the Milky Way galactic core. Right, it was taken perhaps tukang gabi. Anyway, we'll use this. Obviously, nothing is in it. It hasn't been edited yet, and it's our job to make this photograph as accurate as possible, or as realistic as possible. And we will try to explain adjustment layers. So again, the adjustment layer can be found in here. So if we're going to click this, you will be given the different options. These are the layer adjustments that you can add to the photograph. If pwede po gani, or if you're going to look up in this property area here, in this property panel, na I learned, and then we have libraries, and then adjustments. These are the adjustment layers. So we have here brightness, contrast levels, so on and so forth. Again, you can access the adjustment layers by clicking here, or you can just select any of these layer adjustments. Now, if this cannot be found on your Adobe Photoshop workspace, just click on Windows and then click on Adjustments. Again, click on Windows and then Adjustment. All right, let's proceed. Okay, the first adjustment layer is brightness or contrast. Brightness or contrast makes adjustments to the tonal range of your image. The brightness slider is for adjusting the highlights in your image, and the contrast slider is for adjusting the shadows in your image. Alright, so basically this adjustment layer will allow us to change the brightness and the contrast of our photo. So again, going back, to add the brightness adjustment layer on top of our image, all we need to do is to click here. And then select brightness and contrast, or you can just select kani. So let's click that, and then automatically you will see an addition of layer in our layer palette, and it will look something like this. So it's a little bit different. There must be this icon, and then followed with the artboard, just like the normal layers. But again, the difference is that naa na siya icon, and then as you've noticed, na ay properties na magawas. All right, so once you added the adjustment layer, the properties will be displayed, and this is how you're going to change or perhaps to modify the brightness or contrast, or just about any adjustment layer or layer adjustments that you will add. So sliding the brightness slider will allow you to change the brightness of the image. Okay, you can either make it darker or increase the brightness, diba? Let's set it back to 0. That means it's default. The contrast will allow you to change the shadows. You can either increase the tone of the shadows or perhaps make it darker. Now, sliding it to the left will decrease the tone of the shadows, and then sliding it to the right will increase the tone of the shadows. That means magkaitom ang shadows, something like that. All right. So that is a brightness and contrast adjustment. And perhaps one of the most important thing that you will notice is that basically right now we are working on a single layer. Basic if we're Now let's try to unlock this. Kana unlock na siya. What will happen if we are going to move the layer on, or perhaps we'll move the adjustment layer below the layer itself? It will not take effect. Kana mawala ang yang effect. It's because the adjustment layer will only affect to the layers below it. Nasa ubos niya. So again, let's move it upwards para makita nato ang changes. For example, kana. Alright? If ato na i-move dire is paubos, mawala ang yang effect. It's because, again, adjustment layers will only take its effect on the layers below it. Dapat nasa ubos ang layers nga ganahan ka nga ma-adjust. However, if nasa ibabaw ang layer, if nasa ubos ang adjustment layer, then, of course, in this case, no adjustments will be displayed. It's because it's at the bottom of the layer. So what you have to think about is that adjustment layers will only apply to the layers below it. Kana. So for example, if we will add another photo, hold on. For example, this one, if you're going, okay, so right now, since this photograph is located below the adjustment layer, the adjustments, which is the brightness and contrast, is affected to both of the layers, diba? However, if I'm going to move this particular layer on top of the adjustment layer, then it will no longer affect the adjustments will no longer affect to this layer. It's because it is on top of this layer right here. Okay, so basically there are no limit. So as long as tanang layers nga ganahan ka maapektuhan sa imong adjustment, if we're going to put it below the adjustment layer, then it will get affected. However, there are another trick. You can also just include it right here. For example, if ganahan ko nga ang adjustment will only take its effect to this photograph kane, and I don't want it to apply it to this layer, you can also do that by clicking the layer itself, adjustment layer, and click this. This is clip mask. Clip. It will say this adjustment affects to all layers below. Click to, again, click to clip to layer. Meaning we can choose to just apply this adjustment layer to this layer by clicking this one. All right. So notice that even though this particular layer is below this layer, wala siyang napektahan, kanilang naapektahan. It's because we clipped it in this layer, meaning there are only one layer that will be affected by its effect. Okay, and then to undo, just click this again. All right, so that is brightness and contrast. Let's just remove this, and then let's go on. Next, adjustment layer. Levels. Levels modify the tonal values in an image by adjusting the levels of the shadows, midtones, and highlights. It's one of the most used tools in the adjustment layer panel, and using just a touch of levels will go a long way in correcting your image. Okay? So, if gaina, we are talking about the brightness and contrast. So basically, adding the brightness will change the overall exposure, perhaps, of the image, and then the contrast will allow you to change the shadows only, the tonal value of the shadows. Now, the levels will allow you to change the highlights, the midtones, and the shadows. So when you say highlights, those are the parts of the image that are kanang pinaka-bright sa bright test, kanang pinaka-bright ba, pinaka-hayag sa compared to the rest of the images. For example, if we're going to take a look at this picture, what are the parts that are the perhaps bright parts of the image? So we have here kaning mga stars, di ba? Because they have the brightest color among the rest of the image. Basically, these are the highlights. And then the midtones, and then, I'm sorry, the shadows, of course, the dark ones. And then the midtones are, let's just say, between the bright and the dark, between the highlights and the shadows. So using level adjustment layer, you will be able to control those. So how do we do that? Again, we can just click this, or again, going back, click this, and then levels. Okay? So notice that lahi na po ang icon yung magawas, and then lahi na po ng property ang display. So in the first part, it will allow you to change this. We have here the darkness, the highlights, and then the midtones. Okay? So I don't really have a very concrete explanation on how to use this. What I can just give you as a tip is that you can just explore this. Try to slide these sliders right to left, and then try to catch with gunsay kanang mataste nimo ba. There's only one way to learn this, but just to try it yourself. Okay, so there are different sliders in here. Again, what I can just say, if you wanted to make things darker, then all you need to do is to move it to the right, kaning side, kaning sa left na icon. And if you want to make things, if you want to make the highlights brighter, then all you need to do is move it patunga, and then you can adjust the midtones right here. Okay? You can also use this slider at the bottom. This will allow you to change the brightness, basically the brightness and the contrast of the photograph. Just like that. Okay? So that is levels. Again, I don't have a very concrete explanation on how to use this. All you need to do is just to try it yourself. Alright, let's remove that and let's proceed. The next thing is curves. Curves let you adjust as many points as you want throughout the entire tonal range of your image, and is the most important, powerful, and precise tool for editing the tones in an image. So basically, this is one of the most important adjustment layer. Perhaps this is the particular adjustment layer that you will use most of the time when you are designing. If you're designing or perhaps making composition, curves is one of the adjustment layers that you will use most of the time, at least based on my experience. So curves allow you to adjust many points as you want. So again, I don't have much explanation, a concrete explanation on how to use this, but I'll like to show you what it does. So again, click on the adjustment layer and then curves. So here you will see a straight line. Right now everything is straight. That means that is the default. Basically, if it's got straight lines, that means you haven't changed anything to it yet. You haven't changed anything to the layer or to the image itself yet. Now, what you're going to understand is that in this kaninga square, this part right here are the highlights. Okay, the right side would be the highlights, and then the left side will be the dark, the shadows. Kumbaga. All right, so you can change. You can move the the line around. Okay, and you can move it around and then see how it affects to your design. And okay, so tendency is that if this is the first time, that you're going to use curves, it will be a little bit complicated and then a little bit hard to understand exactly how it's being used. But what I can just suggest is that, again, let's reset it back. Okay, again, changing this area will be high. If we're going to change anything on the line nga kanina as the left side, it will allow you to change to adjust the dark sides, kumbaga the shadows. And then if we're going to change anything right here, it will take effect to the highlights. And then sa tunga, ang midtones. So right now it's selected to RGB, but you can select different channels here. You can either select you can choose to perhaps select the red, green, and blue colors, because right now we've selected RGB as our color since this is intended for katong web contents, diba? Anyway, again, you can either select all of the colors here, the RGB, and then if we're going to adjust this, it will adjust all of the colors. Or you can select each color one by one. So red, for example, We all know that the if you can remember in our previous lesson, the opposite of red is blue, diba? So for example, if you want to increase the redness of this color, the redness of this image rather, then all we need to do is to move it upwards, diba? Notice how the colors change since we selected red. Since if we're going to move it upwards, then it will increase the color. Now, if we're going to move it downwards, then it will decrease the red and it will proceed to the opposite color of red, which is blue. Diba? Again, if we're going to move it upwards, since we selected red, then the red will be increased. But if we're going to move it downwards, then the blue will be the color will be changed to blue, because again the opposite of red is blue. All right. So right now we are trying to change the color of the red colors to the entire sa mid-tone, because we are changing it through the mid-tone kanina, tas to nga change. How about if we're just going to change gananta nga ang color red mawala ra siya sa mga dark shadows sa mga shadows rather. So then we can move it from here. Direta will change. Ana. Or we can use this. Kana. Na if we want to make the red to be kanang makita siya sa mga highlights, then we can increase it right here. Nana. So as you can see, this adjustment layer is very accurate depending on how you're going to make your layers, or how you're going to make your layers appear. All right. However, this might be a little complicated with regards to the adjustment layers. Curves is one of the most used, therefore this is one of the most complicated as well. So again, all you need to do is to make sure to practice it on your own. Just try it on your own, so you'll see what we are talking about. Okay. So okay, let's try that. Let's try the rest of the color. So we can select green. So we know that the opposite of green is blue. I think violet. So if we're going to move it downside, then the violet will the overall color will change to violet. If we're going to move it upwards, then the overall color will change to green. So that is curves. Anyway, we'll talk more about curves in our future lesson, because curves will be used most of the time with color grading or color matching, which is one of our lessons soon. Okay, next we have exposure. Exposure lets you adjust exposure levels with 3 sliders: exposure, offset, and gamma. Exposure will adjust only the highlights of the image, offset adjusts the midtones, and gamma will adjust the dark tones only. Right, so this is one of the adjustment layers that will allow you to change the tonal value of the colors. So to add the exposure, all you need to do is click this and then add exposure, and then you'll see another properties here again. The exposure will allow you to change the highlights. Okay. The offset will allow you to modify the midtones. And then gamma corrections will allow you to change the shadows, something like that. All right. So basically, as you have probably noticed, these adjustment layers talks more about the tonal value of each colors, diba? The brightness, levels, contrast, so on and so forth. So basically, it will be totally up to you what you're going to use, depending on how you are going to how do you want the design to appear. It will be totally up to you. Most of the time, all of these four, especially the brightness, contrast, levels, and exposures, usually can provide the same output, almost similar, if not the same, but similar output. All right, so let's proceed. We have Vibrance. This adjustment layer modifies the vibrance of an image in 2 ways. The saturation slider evenly increases the saturation of all the colors in the image. The Vibrance slider modifies the level of saturation of all the colors too, but more selectively. focusing on the least saturated colors and avoiding oversaturation of skin tones. Alright, so let's remove the exposure adjustment and then let's add vibrance. Alright, let's just see how it works. So increasing the vibrance here. Alright, so basically it allows you to perhaps boost the colors somehow. Same with saturation, diba? Okay. Alright, depending, it will be totally up to you now which one are we going to use, either the vibrance or saturation. Again, all you need to do is try it yourself and which ones fit better on your taste. Okay, obviously less saturation, no color. More saturation, more color. Something like that. And then next, we have hue and saturation. Hue and saturation lets you adjust the hue, saturation, and the lightness of your entire image or in a specific range of color in your image. All right, same thing that we're going to do. Let's try that. Hue and saturation. All right, so hue will allow you to change the overall, perhaps, color of your picture. All right, so let's try to slide it and let's see what happens. Kana. So right now, by default, muna siya nga tong original. Let's try to move it right to the left. Notice how the overall color has also changed. All right, so basically, you will allow you to change the overall color of your design, of the photos rather. So let's reset that. And then saturation again will allow you to either decrease the color or increase the color. And then the lightness will allow you to add luminance to the color. So you can either, just like what we did with the curves a while ago, you can either do it all at the same time, all of the colors at the same time by selecting master, or you can select it one by one. So you can either select each color range. For example, ganan kang mausap ang mga reds. If we have reds, do you think we have reds in this photograph? Obviously, yes. So we can either change the saturation of color reds, or we can change the hue of the reds. Kumante mo? The only thing that's changing are the colors that have red range. Kana. Then let's reset. Let's try yellows. Do we have yellows? Okay, there are no yellows in this photo, so let's skip that. How about greens? All right, there are no greens in this photograph. How about cyans? Wala gyapon. How about blues? Walay blue. Magentas. Daghang magenta. Okay? Alright, so basically you can either choose to change the entire color or the hue and saturation of the entire colors of all the colors, or you can just select it. You can just change or modify the hue and saturation of the color selectively. Okay, so let's remove that and let's proceed. Next is we have color balance. Color balance adjustment changes the mixture of colors in an image. In this example, I've made a selection of the butterfly wings only and adjusted the color balance sliders to bring out the reds and magentas in its wings, just like this. In a particular example, this is the default, and then by increasing the reds of the butterfly color has changed or has increased, something like that. So let's try that in our example right here. So we have color balance. Let's try to increase the reds now. Okay, let's try to increase the magenta, decrease the magenta. Let's try to decrease the blue or something like that. Okay, so basically, again, there is no proper explanation, there are no concrete explanation on how things works here. Again, you'll have to try it yourself. And then we have black and white. The black and white adjustment lets you make grayscale versions of your image. The image on the left is the default settings. Okay, so basically this will just allow you to turn your image to black and white and then perhaps increase its the tonal color of the photo. For example, again, to add black and white adjustment layer, so basically by default this is the default value, Then you can increase the depending on which area that you wanted to increase. For example, ganahan ko nga katong mga reds is mas dark, then I can do it right here, or perhaps mas light tong mga reds. Then katong mga blues ganahan kong mas dark, di makita din siya. All right. All right. Anyway, so basically it will allow you to change your image to, instead of colored images, it will allow you to change it to black and white. Let's proceed. We have photo filter. Photo filter adds different color filters on top of your image. All right. Most of the time, pareha naman na sila. Here, for example, ganahan ko nga, and you can select the filter here, kani. So we have this one. So far, wala siya ni effect. Okay, dara. So for example, you can select the different presets here. So warming filter, we have orange, we have cyan. Nah. Okay, so you already know what it does basically from the term suggest filter. Let's remove that and let's proceed. Channel mixer. Channel mixer modifies the colors in your image to create tinted or grayscale image. So let's try that. Channel mixer. Oops. That's not right. Color channel mixer here. So, alright, same thing. Okay. Alright, so perhaps what you've noticed here is that if setting aside gaina will allow you, from brightness to curves, will allow you to change the tonal value of each colors, diba? Brightness and darkness. And this, the second part would be mostly about colors, how you're going to modify the colors. Again, you can select any of these adjustment layers when you're doing your composition, depending on how you are going to, how do you desire to make it up to, how do you want it to appear, basically. So let's proceed with, or napadayo sa color lookup. So next is the color lookup. This adjustment comes with a bunch of prepackaged looks for you to apply to your image. Each look remaps the colors in your image by using the lookup table. Okay, so most of the time, I usually use this whenever I'm already done with my composition. So what it does is it will just give me a preset of different looks, or perhaps yeah, it looks on how my graphic design will display. All right, so let's try to open up an example of my composition here, and then let's see exactly what it does to the design. So for example, kani, now right now this is already done. So perhaps if I wanted to change the emotion, the mood of my design, so usually I'll add color lookup, and that is when I'm already done. If humana ko tanan, ganan kong adan ako siya, og perhaps if I wanted to change the mood or something like that, then I would like to use the adjustment layer, color lookup, and then I'm going to select the different preset that we have here. We can either add more by downloading presets online, but so far this is what I have here. So let's try to take a look some of the examples that we have. So let's try the two strip look. Let's see how it affects our design. All right, so notice that it changes the entire look of my design. So it changes perhaps it changed the mood as well, or the emotion. So let's try the three strip look. Kana. And then we have bleach bypass. And then we have candlelight. We have crisp warm. We have crisp winter. Drop blues. Let's try another one. Film stock. Okay. All right. Okay, so these are just some of the different looks that I have downloaded in my computer, but I haven't really downloaded it. This came as a package with my Adobe Photoshop installer. But again, you can always add more by selecting this. No. If I'm not mistaken, this one, load 3D look, and then just select the color lookup adjustment layers that you've already downloaded on your computer. Okay, so that's it for the color adjustments. Let's proceed to the next. Let's just remove this. Alright, next is invert. The invert adjustment layer makes a photo negative effect by inverting the colors of your image. Okay, let's close this. Alright, so for example, if you wanted to take or perhaps give your design with a negative effect, diba? If you can remember, if you have, maybe if you can remember with if na may makaraan niya cameras at sa inyo ha, diba? Cameras before the digital cameras nga now also we still have the analog cameras before that uses film or film cameras rather. So basically na ay negative, and then you're going to develop the actual photograph from the negative films. But anyway, it is going to be the same. So if we're going to add like an inverted, basically inverted or balinga color, everything will be the contrary. Sa tuwid nalimot ko. Term basta negative colors will you will use invert. So just like that. So apparently this is the inverted color of our design. Okay. So basically the last group of adjustment layers are about adding effects or artistic effects to the design. Next, we have Posterize. It will allow you to produces a flat poster-like appearance to a photo by reducing a number of brightness values or levels in the image. So let's try that. Okay. Yeah. Alright, so that is Posterize. So it will add artistic filter for effects. Then threshold. The threshold tool turns your image into a black and white image. So let's try. And then you can change its values. And then lastly, or not lastly, but another one is we have gradient map. This tool converts the grayscale range of an image to a custom gradient fill. The gradient map tool comes with a bunch of different gradients, all of which you can adjust to your liking in the gradient editor window. Checking the reverse box inverts the colors of your gradient. So let's try that. Gradient map. Okay, so it will allow you to add gradient or combination of multiple colors to your design. So you can either set it yourself by clicking this. Kana. For example, I want it to be like blue and perhaps the dark color will be red. Okay. Or you can do it reverse. So basically you can use different colors, not just this one. There are tons of preset that you can use, or you can set it yourself. So in my case, there are tons of presets that I have here for gradient colors. So for example, if I wanted to add metal, kana. If I wanted to add neutral density here, okay. All right. So I'm pretty sure if you have Adobe Photoshop on your own, like there are also different preset on your end. Try to click this area kanina gear, and then select if na may makita mo inani, then click that and just click append. Okay. All right. So that is gradient map. And then next is we have selective color. The selective color adjustment layer selectively modifies the amount of a primary color without modifying the other primary colors in your image. So again, we're just going to try that, see how it works. Selective color, and then how about cyan? Reds. Okay. Yellows. We don't have yellows here. Let's select magentas. All right. So basically, you can either change the different value of the color ranges in each color range. So again, using this, using the entire adjustment layer is not really a perhaps one thing that most graphic designers do, but you can always select each of the groups of adjustment layers, diba? For example, if you wanted to change the tonal value, you can just either select brightness levels or exposure. Or if you wanted to change the color, then or modify the color, then you can use either of these adjustment layers, or you can use multiple adjustment layers for that matter, so on and so forth. Okay, so adjustment layers will allow you, again, this is very important, and I want it to be, I want to clarify this, that adjustment layers will basically allow you not to change the entire pixels, the pixels of the entire photograph. It will just allow you to create a layer and then add the effects to it, the adjustments to it, and then if that layer is on top of the photograph, then the effects will be taken to that photograph itself. Diba? Again, remember that the effects will only affect the effects, or the adjustment will only affect effects to the layer below the adjustment layer. It will not affect to the layers on top of the adjustment layers. Okay, so let's open up an example. Example na ako nga work PSD file that has adjustment layers, and let's see how it worked. Okay, for example, this one. Okay, here. So these are some of the adjustment layers that I've added. So let's try to focus on the dog. Okay, right now, so these are the adjustment layers I've used to this particular dog only. So if I'm going to remove these adjustments layers, let's see how the dogs will look like. Oh, I'm sorry. Moni, okay. So this is how the dog look like if I haven't added, if I will remove the adjustment layers. And then let's try to open up each of the adjustments. So we have here kane. This is curve. All right, and then here this is another curve, and then this one, this is a mask. All right, so on and so forth. Okay, so basically I've used different adjustment layers to come up with this design. So let's try to hide all of the adjustment layers, and let's see how it look like if wala adjustment layers. Okay, all right, so supposedly this is how the photograph look like before I've added ano pa di ay? Okay, this is how the design look like if I haven't added the adjustment layer to it. But then again, I've used adjustment layers, different adjustment layers for that matter, to make sure that this photograph, this composition will look as realistic as possible. So this is how we are going to make use of adjustment layer. Okay, so let's have a practice activity. We will right now, so we will try to turn this image, this astrophotograph, kumbaga, into something very, perhaps a little more realistic. So let me share a story. Let me share first how this photograph is taken. So basically, I've taken this using my mobile phone. This was taken in our front yard, and right now, this is raw photo, so that means it hasn't been edited yet. This is a photograph taken directly from a phone. So the reason why its color niya is medyo violet siya, it's because perhaps you all know that compared to regular or professional cameras or DSLRs, mobile phones sensor are just a little too small. Diba? Gamay kayo ang sensor sa atong camera, sa atong mga phones. That's why it will not output an accurate color. So it depending on kinsa gagama sa inyong sensor. In my case, this is my camera sensor is made from Sony. So it's a little better compared to the rest of the sensors in the market, but it's not perfect. That's why whenever I take night shots, mahimo siyang medyo violet. And of course, we don't want our I don't want my design, or I don't want my photograph to look like this. I have to fix this to make it look realistic. So basically, this is a photograph of the Milky Way galactic core, and we want to perhaps emphasize the galactic core itself. We want to display the beauty of the Milky Way galactic core. All right. So actually, to be perfectly fair, Photoshop is not the right tool to fix this image. To fix this image, the best tool to use is Adobe Lightroom. Okay. However, I just want, for the sake of this lesson, since we haven't done any masking or anything any other lessons yet, we've only discussed the layers and today adjustment layers. So that's why we are not going to add multiple layers to our design, but to make this lesson easy. So anyway, soon in our next lesson, once we'll be talking about mask, then we'll be able to create a composition that is supposed to be that is something like this. Kani, because this is a composition of multiple layers. So right now we're just going to focus to one layer, and then we will adjust the color using adjustment layers. All right. So what I want is, um, again, we want to make it as realistic as possible and perhaps to look better. And then we want to remove the violet color. Perhaps what usually the night light colors, diba, na siya dark or midnight dark or midnight black, which is dark blue, something like that. So our overall color here should change to midnight blue or something like that, since of course this was taken in midnight. So perhaps the first thing that I'm going to do is to add curve. I want to I want to decrease the I want to increase the highlights and then decrease the shadows. So again, there are different ways to do that, diba? We can either select brightness or contrast levels and or exposure. Okay, but for starters, we will add the levels. Okay, so let's start with levels, and then we'll just going to try with the sliders here and there, and then let's just try. Let's see how it works. So I wanted to decrease the shadows, the tonal value of the shadow. So I'm going to move it to the right, perhaps slightly to the right, and then I want to increase the highlight, so I'm going to move it slightly to the left, and perhaps move it somewhere here, the mid-tone somewhere here. Okay, and then how about, okay, let's try to decrease the brightness a little darker. Okay, all right, so this is just gonna be for, all right, so I think this is better. And then let's add another exposure, let's add another adjustment here. Okay, how about let's try to add exposure. Okay, let's try to increase the exposure a little more to add, to add highlights to the stars. And notice that since I've changed the exposure, everything has changed as well. So let's try to increase the gamma correction. That means it will add darkness to the shadows. Okay, so that's better. Okay, up. Let's set it back to 0. Okay, all right. So I think that's better. And the next is I wanted to change the color. So right now, as you can see, there are just tons of reds and magentas in this particular color. We want to fix that, and again, we'll try to change it to some kind of dark blue or something like that. So to do so, we will add, I'm gonna add curves. Okay, so here. So the first thing that I'm going to change is, again, this is not the perhaps the perfect way of fixing this. This is just for the sake of this lesson. So I'd like to decrease the redness. Okay, so again, if I'm going to slide it upwards, then the redness will increase. And however, if I'm going to send it backwards, since the opposite of red is blue, then here. Okay, so it's starting to look better now. Diba? Okay, and then how about let's add a little bit of green to it. Okay, all right, and then for the blues, let's try. Well, try to decrease that. Okay, So let's try to decrease the blue on the, I'm sorry. Oh, that's it. Let's try to decrease the blue on the highlights. So we're just going to move it from this area. Okay. So, okay, for the meantime, that's just it. But again, this is not a perfect way to fix this. I actually have a better, I actually have a better composition, or better perhaps version in this particular photograph, and uploaded it through my Facebook, my personal Facebook account. And might as well, you can either check it right there to see the actual, or perhaps the perfect modification of this, or adjustment to this photograph. However, I didn't really use Adobe Photoshop in there. I used Adobe Lightroom. Okay, so basically that is adjustment layers. This is just one of the common use for for adjustment layers in Adobe Photoshop. So for your assignment, I'm going to post it through our Google Classroom. I will, same thing that we're going to do. Those students who have computers or laptops at home, then you can do hands-on activity. And then for those who doesn't have, then you can just, same thing that we always that same thing that we did before. You're going to create a step-by-step procedure on how to do so. For your assessment, I'm going to upload the link later on, or soon, and then the deadline will be Friday, July 16, 2021 at 11:59, as well as your assignment. Okay, so that's all for today. Thank you so much for making this far in the video. Again, if you have any questions or clarifications, feel free to comment down below in our Facebook group post, or you can send in your questions to our Facebook chat groups. Okay, thank you so much again. Please keep yourself safe. God bless us all.